Hello, everyone. You are listening to Joyful Living, and I am Quinn Curtis, and we are joined today by a very dear friend of mine and an inspiration in my life. And I want to just give you a little bit of background before we officially welcome him on the show. But his name is Jon Marro. He's an artist and creative director who collaborated and infused his intrepid sense of color with such clients as Jason Mraz, Dave Matthews, Maroon 5, Madonna, Whole Foods Market, Manduka Yoga, Credit Suisse, MTV, CBS, the San Diego Zoo, Cafe Gratitude, and was even commissioned to create a portrait of His Holiness the Dalai Lama for his 80th birthday. Jon currently creates and communes in Southern California with a community of big-hearted, soulful artists and activists committed to changing the world by changing themselves. Jon, welcome officially to the Joyful Living podcast.
Yay. So glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. We're going to have such a good conversation today. I'm so excited for all of you listening because Jon has brought some magic into the world from his depths of his heart and soul, and we're going to be talking about that and how that can touch and inspire you, as well as some of the topics that he and I both have a lot of passion about that we'll be discussing. But before we get going, I always love asking this core key question of all of my guests because the question is, what does joyful living look and feel like to you? And so while you're kind of thinking of your answer, just want to lay a foundation that the reason why we ask this is a major premise of the Joyful Living podcast is that joy comes in all different shapes and sizes, and there is no one size fits all version of joy. But a lot of us have been really mistaken and misunderstood that, and we've been trying to find joy in the society's prescription of what happiness should look like. And so this is an exploration, and whenever we bring on guests, it's so refreshing to hear what's Jon's flavor of joyful living look like. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with us a little behind the scenes peek of that, we would love to hear it.
I love that. Thank you. Well, I think there isn't necessarily a one thing, but joy, what it feels like and what it looks like, and often how it expresses in my life is through color, first and foremost. It always has. And color as a way of vitality, as a way of expression, as a way of mood shifting. And even when I was young, more than even drawing, I loved coloring. I just loved bringing color to a white page, to a blank page. So color has always been just a synonymous with joy in my life and as an expression of it. And then things like nature and travel for me and being in wide open spaces, there's a sense of freedom. Freedom is also synonymous with joy to me when I feel free from even the monotony of my own thoughts or the normalness of my own, hometown or space when I travel beyond what I know. So the expansion of probably consciousness or learning. I'm someone who's endlessly curious. So when I'm learning, I'm always joyful, and I'm like a front row seat into life and into beautiful spirited information. And then like I said, nature. I grew up in Vermont, and so nature was my first God, spirituality, my first connection to something larger than life, really. And seeing the lakes and the rivers and the frogs and the turtles and the nature doing its thing and living so tranquilly and peacefully, I loved being a part of that and swimming in the lakes and rivers. And even nowadays too, if I can go hop in an ocean or a river and just be chilled to the bone of just feel alive in every cell of my body, that always brings me joy. So there's something about exhilaration, nature, color, vitality that really speaks to joyful living. And I can also do that through wonderful food and community and conversation and meeting like-minded hearts and souls that also speak or point to something larger than my current day-to-day. So that's the top of mind. That's my top of mind answer.
Well, it is a gorgeous, deep top of mind answer, Jon. So thank you. And it's actually making me remember that one of my favorite things about you is that you really do live in such a space of wonder and clarity. And so I'm curious, as I'm sure some of you who are listening were like, wow, that's a really inspiring answer. And that's really powerful clarity. Just curious about, have you struggled with this in the past? And what does that struggle look like to be able to get to these spaces of clarity, or to even be able to allow yourself into these spaces of joy that you really do love?
I mean, absolutely. Of course, I've lost that before. And I think there's something, what I even love about being asked questions and about being interviewed is, and I'm not sure if you've experienced this as well, but there's something about, a little bit of, it's less being on a soapbox as much as when I'm called to give my most alert, present, or conscious answer, something divine comes through, or something more clear comes through. So, and I'm speaking, everything I'm saying now, I need to be reminded myself. I'm speaking to myself. I need to be listening to. And so these are moments of more, more clarity, but it's also something I strive for. And so to answer the question, it's almost as simple as when someone says, okay, like take a deep breath. You even had us take a deep breath before we started this podcast. And these very simple reminders of, oh yeah, deep breath, one step at a time. It's like yoga, where the most beginning poses are also the most advanced poses. And there's an endless sense of never-ending mastery or never-ending presence. So for me, it's something as simple as whenever I lose the plot or get distracted, these very simple kindergarten-like reminders of take a breath, be present, look around, it's going to be okay. Yeah. That draws me home, and I'm right back where I need to be. So, and I'm old enough to know, like, okay, if I'm angry, frustrated, in a funk, go for a run, go take a hike, go walk outside, go in nature, go do these things you like to do. Okay, vent it out with coloring or drawing, or work on a piece of art. Call a friend, someone who will hold space and be a wise counsel to say the words or help guide me back there. So I know enough to both ask for help, as well as I know enough to what is my own help, and I can sort of medicate through, my own joyful living remedies.
I love that. Delicious. So with that being said, Jon has created some absolute magic in his book that was just released not that long ago by Simon and Schuster, and it is gorgeous. It's called Keepers of Color, and I'm just going to read the little the sub-description: a creative hero's journey into the world within. And guys, this book is pure magic. I am just loving bringing it into my daily practice of just really connecting in with my heart and soul, and just having that moment to listen and to refresh and recharge. And so just to give you a little bit of a peek behind the scenes, if you're watching the video version of this, then you could see there is this darling character, Color, who's leading you through the workbook. But it's a workbook, but it's also a coloring book, but it's also just like powerful inquiries, which Jon has titled Within Inquiries.
With inquiries.
So good. To just take you through your own hero's journey, really. And so there's opportunities to just draw in some of the pages. There's opportunities to color. There's exercises and other pieces within it. I mean, if you're seeing me flip through this, I think you're seeing just what a gorgeous treasure of a book this is. And so, Jon, I know it's always the most uncomfortable part sometimes of marketing our own heart and soul things, but just tell us a little bit about, the story of this and how it was born, and what you're desiring from it, and what it is to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. The way I've described it is I was at a crossroads in my life, really, where I have been an artist my whole life, and I've been doing, since I graduated, I've been mostly a freelancer doing a lot of design for other people, and it's introduced me to incredible clients and people and opportunities, and I'm beyond grateful. But one of the things I realized was I was so scared at some level of being a starving artist that I was putting all my attention on the starving part rather than the artist part. And I hadn't fully like leapt into my whole, what you would call my dharma or my soul's purpose, or really what I came to do. I was flirting with it at some level, but I wasn't actually fully in. And so there was a combination of kind of just perfect storm things where I read two books. There's a book that probably people might be familiar with called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. A wonderful book that was, I think, written in the 90s actually. And that was what I would say my book is probably most similar to. You know, I think my book is definitely unique, and I have a wonderful publisher. Her name is Zena Musica, who leads these incredible authors academy. She calls it the Empowered Authors Academy, and it's going to be online so people can take it. If anybody has a book or something they want to say, I can't recommend that enough. She's wonderful, and she's such a good coach, and she believes everyone has a story to tell. And so she was leading, she was leading one of these Authors Academy, and I was in there going like, okay, what is my book? I have a crux of it. And people were saying, I want to write the next Eat, Pray, Love, or I want to write the next 4 Agreements, or these next. My book is a lot like, and they were referencing other books. And I realized what they were referencing was these books that were in and of themselves unique. They were kind of like unlike any other books. And so I really got clear. I want to write a book like that. I want to write a book that inspires other books, that launches other books and tales and inspirations to be told, and something that's unique in and of itself, that is its own little world. And I knew that my soul wouldn't let me do anything other than that. Like, it wouldn't let me just necessarily imitate something and do my own version of it. It had to be its own unique expression. So the book really took me on an adventure. I thought I was going to do one thing. There was really 2 books in me that were happening. And it was the book that I thought I was going to write, and then the book that actually wanted to come through. And when I surrendered to that book, there was a whole world in there. There was these characters, and there was a backstory, and there was a myth. And so I had to both wrestle and toil and refine this offering that's part folktale, part pep talk, part coloring book, part journal, part workbook, and present in a way where I could lead people through their own hero's journey and go through my own. So it really took me through my own. And my intention was, if I'm trying to break free from my own fears of confronting starving artists, or confronting, I don't know how to bring what's inside out. I don't know how to do that successfully. And I'm scared to fail. I'm scared to wow, art is the only thing I'm relatively good at. What if I fail at it? What's that? How can I live with myself? Will that be depressing? But I realized that it was more depressing and more daunting and more sluggish and lethargic and just annoying to not confront it and not actually square my shoulders and go after it. And so this was a deep dive into it. And one of the first images that came to me, you flipped through it in the page, was this image of a diving board. And I think we've all can metaphorically have been there. Like, do I dive in? Do I not? Indecision. Do I take a first step? Do I leap? And that was the page that came to me. And what you have to do is literally the first line, the first mark you make in the book is you have to draw the line somewhere. You have to draw the water line. There's a diving board, and you see the he's on a high dive. That character color's on a high dive, and you have to put where the water line is. Now, if you put it up by where the diving board is, you don't have to dive very far, but the water is quite deep, which sort of shows maybe psychologically, wow, you might be dealing with a really, a deep problem or something your soul's trying to figure out. Or if you draw the water line lower, it might feel like you have a really high, big leap of faith to make. And so it begins to I really wanted to start to tap into my own subconscious and see, can you help me here? Color, this little character, he's almost, not even almost, he's a Sherpa, he's a shaman, he's a sprite, he's a guide. He's just on your team and on your dreams team. He wants to help you realize it. And what I saw for myself was, I grew up in Vermont, and I grew up in the safe and bucolic, comforting hills where there wasn't a lot of violence. There wasn't a lot of big cities, or a lot of, a lot of the domestic or municipal or just problems of the world. It was really, I mean, now looking back, it was very tranquil, and so I was always scared of the world, like the big bad world, the New York cities. When I would walk there, you're just towering. You couldn't see nature anywhere. You're just I was surrounded by steel and metal and concrete and taxis and horns and people being annoyed and just moving to the pace of the city. And it devoured me. It felt like the belly of the beast to me. And it also felt in some ways like this is not what I want life to be about, to be striving towards Wall Street or commerce or marketing. And so I was always in this push-pull, and I didn't know how to enter that. I didn't know how to enter that in the world. And I didn't know how my inner artist where it fit in that world. And so it was always a very scary thing. And I think at some level, I was hesitant and sort of trapped between boyhood and manhood, and in this purgatory of like, okay, well, I'll do design and design for others as a way to be exercising my creative muscles and being creative and making a living and making money, and feeling semi-self-expressed. But then really, if I'm being honest, there was just a lot more inside of me that wanted to come out. And this book was the first attempt at that. And then also really wanted to help other people bring whatever was inside them out and say, hey, I believe in you. I'm going through this journey too. Whoever wants to come along, let's do this. And the book, as you mentioned, Quinn, before we started recording, it's not a book that you're going to read in like a weekend. It's a book, it's a journey, it might be 6 months, it might be 2 years. And I think it's supposed to be as long as it takes. And it's about patience. And what was hard for me, or what I'm still discovering, is how do I market that to a fast-paced culture that can like look up on Google or hit Instagram and see things. And we just want things instantly. We live in a microwave culture. We live in an iPhone culture. Yeah. And this is asking you to like not only slow down, but asking you to really go deep. And it's not going to be instant gratification. There's coloring. There's questions that ask things of you, and they're inspiring. But it really a much larger vision of what's possible, not just instant surface things. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with those. I don't believe that, but I do believe for myself, and I feel like a lot of other creatives specifically struggle with, how does my soul express itself? And I think that when we look to people who have successfully done that, whether it's poets or people like Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks or Gandhi, they've drawn inspiration and they've drawn strength and endurance from an otherworldly place. They haven't drawn from the instant gratification. They've drawn from a larger vision, realizing that maybe what's inside of them, that spark, is either eternal, or the work that they're doing they might not even see its completion within their lifetime or in generations, but they start it anyways. And I don't know how you market that. I don't know how you actually begin to sell that. But here I am, like diving in and saying, you know what? Let's create a culture around that. Let's create a journey and a movement around that. And that I believe it's still possible. And I believe that because look at the quotes that everybody's still putting on Instagram. They're usually quotes that have lasted generations, that still speak and point to something larger than instant gratification. So I realized, and calling myself out, that some part of me was selling out and kind of going for the instant gratification of, okay, design, I'll just play it safe. To my friends, my family, I look like I'm, what do you mean, Jon? You're doing amazing work. Everything I see you is inspired and beautiful. And it is. But the real reality was there's something that wanted to come out of me that was deeper, that I didn't know if it was actually going to bring me success or any, financial reward. And I was scared because I didn't know how to navigate that. But I was sick and tired of being scared and wanted to. And I'm someone who posts those inspirational quotes and posts about being brave and posts about going after your dream. And so I was catching myself in my own hypocrisy and said, I got to live this. I got to do this. And so the Keepers of Color called me out, and Xena, my publisher, said, this is your coming out party. This is you actually coming out as an artist and as someone who has something to say in the world. So that's my little answer for how this book came to be. The other one, sorry, I just realized, I I read The Artist's Way, and then I read this incredible book that I literally, honestly feel like I could go on a book tour just touting this other book, even before my book, which is called The Great Work of Your Life by
Oh
Stephen
my
Cope.
gosh, I'm literally reading that right now.
It's game changer. It launched me. It pushed me over the edge and caused me to write my book. So yeah,
I would be on that book tour with you. Like, I
it's
agree.
so good. It's so good. Yeah, I wish my book could be anywhere near as good as that book. So yeah.
But it is, and this is a big thing I teach a lot with soul branding, and like, let's do what's in your heart and soul, because what's fascinating, and maybe just because I'm a feeler, but I have to believe that other people are having the same experience with your book. I can tell when I hold it, when I open it, when I go to do anything in it, that it's this safe container. It's this space that's so full of soul and love and magic. And you just don't get that kind of a creation out in the world unless that's really what infused that birth of that project. Right? So it's so fascinating to me, especially as I've really worked on this with branding, is that, you know, it's even less about the actual words, and it's so much more about the heart and soul behind the words that ends up changing, you know, somebody's experience with the book. So I feel like, I mean, this is your own masterpiece, right? And it feels that way, and the world needs that. So
Thank you. I heard this great quote about Steven Spielberg that I really, he's someone that I look up to and admire as someone who's brought his inner worlds to life. But someone said that, you know, he's done Jaws and Jurassic Park and Close Encounters, and there's movies that are wonderful, people know, and there's like scary moments in them. But they say that as a director, you always feel like there's a benevolent father figure holding your hand even through the scary parts, you know, in his movies. And I felt that was really beautiful. And that's something that I definitely wanted to infuse my book with. Is I'm not a father yet, but to give people that insurance, like it's going to be okay. And I think at some level, that's what I was looking for and needed in how do I go from someone who has an endlessly curious, childlike spirit that wants to take on what can feel like a very intimidating, violent, dark, scary world at times. And I needed a little character that was going to guide me through it. And color just popped up, you know, he popped into my little head, and, you know, safe enough, and he has hubris enough. And so in the very beginning, and it's not really a spoiler alert, but I'll tell you how the book, when I knew I had a book, I had an idea for a hero's journey coloring book, and I wrote a proposal, and I got a book deal that way. It was actually, for me, incredibly easy. And I don't think it's that way for a lot of people. So I feel very blessed, because my publisher really loved my art and she believed in me. And so, but I didn't know exactly, I knew hero's journey coloring book, which is a wonderful idea and a concept that you can see forward. But the hero's journey, well, let me just speak on that for real quickly. The hero's journey, for those of you who don't know, is a phrase that was coined by Joseph Campbell, who was a scholar and a mystic and a mythologist. He taught at Sarah Lawrence University or Sarah Lawrence College. I'm not sure if it's a university or a college. It's a higher educational field, but he was someone who was just fascinated by mythology and saw the interconnectedness over across different cultures. That he saw that Native American Indians and the India of Asia, the Hindus, had different myths that were almost the same, and they were, you know, there's no way they could have communicated with each other, that some collective consciousness was archetypally infusing stories, and that this hero's journey was, okay, a character, a protagonist has to leave their known world, their ordinary circumstances, go beyond it, and there's a call to adventure. And so the hero's journey is like a circular journey of these stages that you have. And you can see it in Harry Potter and Star Wars and The Matrix and, you know, The Lion King, all these movies that resonate, where it's growth and transformation. And the protagonist goes through a journey. You meet some allies, you meet some like aides that help you along your journey, wise folk. and you confront some fears or you know, a dark figure, which ironically in a lot of ways is also your aid, you know, because he or she helps you become stronger. And so like the Ursula of Little Mermaid, like you need that conflict in order to become stronger and to grow. And then, you know, you ultimately find a treasure, which is usually it's a metaphor for inside of yourself. You find bravery, you find courage, you find strength, you find the riches within, and then bring them back to the old world, and both you and it are transformed because of this journey you've been on, and then you can share about it. And so you know, it's a mythological tale that, and what I love about myths, a lot of times people think, oh, that happened back in the day when Homer wrote the Odyssey. But myths always speak to today as well. They're always relevant and they're always current because they speak on the soul level. It's not just about the current landscape. And so, yeah, I wanted to guide people through that and have a little character that could lead me through and lead others through that they could trust. And so when I knew I had a book, I heard this little character Color say, I lost your dream. You know, that one thing you knew you came here to do, that somehow, some way you came here to do it. I lost it. I was supposed to watch it. I was supposed to look after it, but I got distracted by the life you weren't living. And when I looked back up, it was gone. But the good news is it's inside of you. We just have to go looking for it. And so that's really the call to adventure, to have all of us go through this book and see what's in there, see what's still inside your soul that wants to be expressed or discovered or communicated, or might be stuck, or might be holding on to resentment or not forgiving someone, or just things we forgot about. It's all, for me, in my experience of the soul, is that it doesn't go away. It's in there, and it'll keep knocking at our door or clawing at us or doing whatever it can to get our attention until we face it and deal with it. And usually, once we deal with it, it's a lot of times not as bad as we thought it was, but it's just a matter of that when we, you know, bury it or repress it, that actually can be worse, because it just comes out in anger or upset or just projections, because we haven't made peace with it. And so it can act out violently when really all it wants is our attention. And so from a mythological viewpoint, when you see things like a dragon guarding a treasure, that's actually what it's doing. It's these, you know, whether it's a demon or a gargoyle or a dragon, this kind of enemy or dark character is there, but once you confront it, it actually yields this gift and this treasure that was in there. So it appears intimidating. We have to go in there. And once we do, we are well rewarded from the universe.
I love, as you're describing this, I'm just thinking, you know, a hero's journey truly is a healing journey.
Yeah.
Right. And I love how you're alluding to that and bringing all of those pieces in. And one of the pieces that I've really appreciated in the book that we both mutually love, that's so fun, of The Great Work of Your Life, is I love how he describes that everybody's dharma, or why they were born here, is different. And it's hard to tell who's living in their dharma and who's not. And that one of the ways that sometimes we might think that we would know is they're on stage, they're in the spotlight, they're doing amazing things, but we have no idea if they are actually really in their dharma. So I love that this hero's journey is not about you finding the fame and fortune and becoming the superhero necessarily. It's about you reclaiming the truth of who you really are and bringing that gift to this world, because there's only one of you. We only get to have the one of you, and yeah, just what a treasure that is.
Ooh. And one of the things I love about that he says in that book is there's a thing called dharma denial. And this is one of the things that really kind of called me out was, okay, he described it. I'm paraphrasing here. I really can't recommend reading this book enough if you haven't. Dharma denial was, you think about someone like Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Beethoven, Harriet Tubman, Susan B. Anthony, these characters that are larger than life. And also in his book, just to say, he also references quote unquote regular day people from his life, you know, people, his parents and friends of his that had cancer or that had an illness or had something, or even had a dharmic calling that they either followed or ignored. And so you watch sometimes we think of these people like, well, it was easy for them, they had a passion, but he really shows their struggle and what it took for them to find their kind of niche. And they went through the very human experience of refusing the call or trying to avoid it or trying everything until they finally just accepted their calling. And so dharma denial is this thing where he describes as, let's say there's a fire or a campfire. It's almost like we want to stay warm by the fire, but we don't want to fully step into it. And so we're resisting fully being inflamed by our calling and our passion. But ultimately, that's actually what we really want. And we think we're going to get burned or incinerated. And it's more like every single cell in your body and soul is inflamed and sparked and lit up for all of life when you want that. So it is actually what we really want. We just have to go through the painful resistance of the discomfort, the humanly discomfort of actually kind of going for it. But once we're there, we're right at home, and it's actually everything we've always wanted. So one of the people he mentions is Robert Frost, who's a poet. And Robert Frost said something, again, I'm paraphrasing, where he was talking about your dharma being a seed. It's like a seed. He goes, you don't have to play God. You don't have to create the seed. All you have to do is create the conditions for the seed to flourish. And so Robert Frost made his life about, he actually moved, I think, over to Europe and bought a farm, or bought like this farmland, and just sat down and removed himself into the countryside and was able to work on his poetry with his family. And just that level, he needed to basically shut off from the world to do that. Other people need to go fully in the world to be an activist and sort of stop being a recluse. So it really does call people in different ways. And yes, to what you said, Quinn, there are people who look like they're on stage or doing a million different things, but that actually can be an avoidance. They can just be busying themselves. And that's actually, in a weird way, a kind of laziness. They could be as busy as possible, but they're actually avoiding what, at a soul level, they know that they might need to do. So it calls us in many ways, and it distracts us in many ways, and we resist in many ways. And so there's this crux of all, figures that just kind of grapple with it. It's I don't want to call it an easy thing. It's both a struggle, but also a joy, and a journey. It's a journey. And like any good journey, it's a workout, like there are times you're like, whew, but it'll make you stronger. It will heal you. And at the other end of it, you're transformed and be like, wow, I never thought I could do this. And now that I know I can, something in your cellular memory knows yourself to be different.
I love that. And I know that there are a lot of mothers who listen to this show, and that sometimes this topic, and a lot of mothers and entrepreneurs as well, sometimes the topic of your big dharma thing or living your life work can feel really intimidating when you're already committed into taking care of these little bodies that are depending on you or whatever might happen. And so what I've found, just as like a little nudge, and I'm sure, Jon, you might have some thoughts on this too, but that our dharma callings are typically, they come in support of our highest joy. They come in support of that fullness and fulfillment. And so in my experience, if nothing, it has leaning into that call and following it and walking through those scary paths has done nothing but made me a better mother, when my greatest resistance to it initially was that it would take me away from motherhood, be a distraction from it, right?
Absolutely.
So I think there's this way, I loved how you said that it brings you back to life, and everything is alive and vibrant in your life as a result, which would mean that it's not just your work or your whatever you're doing that's alive. It means your relationships and even your health and your connection with your own body and your soul is different.
Yeah, I think there's a centering that happens where you start to act, speak, even your relationships, how you communicate with others and your family, your work. It's not just a vocation. I think that is part of it, like your soul's purpose here. But Stephen Cope also said your dharma changes. It's not a stagnant thing like, oh, you're supposed to write a book or make a movie or open a restaurant. It can change at different times. And I think that it's actually funny. One of my friends who I showed this book to, she was actually saying, you know what this book would be great for is mothers, because there's a huge contingent of mothers out there that were strong, independent, maybe single powerful women in the workplace who then became mothers and maybe were stay-at-home mothers or basically gave their life to motherhood for a time being. And then now looking back to, do I re-enter the workplace? Do I now follow my dream, my inspiration? What do I do? And she said this book was like, this is perfect for that audience, because I think that we tend to compartmentalize things. Well, now I'm a mother, I have to give up on that, or now I'm a mother is paramount, or motherhood takes that. Motherhood is 1,000%, fatherhood, brotherhood, any of these things are 1,000% friendship dharmas in and of them themselves, and it's to love and be loving, that's probably the ultimate dharma for all of us. That is, no matter your belief, if you look at any sort of sense of spirituality, whether that's, Christianity or Hinduism or Buddhism, all of them speak to the heart and mind coming into balance and being an expression, fully, enlightenment or Christification or individuation or self-realizing, all speak to an inner peace and an inner embodiment of love at some sort. You look at all the great masters, they really became experts at loving, and so Jack Kornfield, who's another author that I love, he says the work is not about becoming perfect, it's about perfecting our love, which I just love. That's like a lifelong task and a lifelong yoga to aspire to. So for all the mothers out there, first of all, amen, thank you, thank you for, I don't know if there's a more divine task that we can experience in this earthly realm than to be mothered or mothering. Mm-hmm. And then to find that calling, I do hope that I trust your intuition on how this book or how your dharma can lead you to exactly what you need to be, and that they're not separate things, that you don't need to keep them as conflicting ideas. And one of the things that the great work of your life talks about in certainly my book, I don't want to keep doing how to bring people back to my book, The Keepers of Color talks about, is dealing with these two opposing forces of that seeming like they're conflicting in one way. And so for me, it was like, am I a starving artist? Am I a designer? What do I do? Do I kind of, thinking that they were two extremes, like I'm either going to be dirt poor and have to live in some shabby, artist apartment where I sleep on a mattress and I've got paint everywhere, or I'm going to be in a cubicle working for some firm that is soul sucking, that I don't love. My mind made those two extremes and they were at war with each other. But one of the things that I've seen is if you can hold two tensions, two seemingly opposing, so this is where Zen and Taoism comes in. You see the yin and the yang, that they seem like they're two opposing forces, but they're actually complementary. And if you can hold them in your mind, this is hard, this is difficult. I feel like the heart is the place that can make sense of it. If you can sit in that tension, sit in the fire of that contradiction, one of usually three things will happen. One of it is like, okay, I'm going to go left instead of right, or I'm going to choose chocolate versus vanilla, or I'm going to, I'm going to just get a job and be a designer, or I'm going to be the artist. Or, that tension will sort of, you can either choose one or the other. One, like if you sit in it long enough, a sort of natural way will open up. Like it'll sort of show. One will kind of fall away and the other will present itself. Like this is the way to go. Or a third way that you never saw happening, like a doorway that you never saw was there, will open up. If you can just sort of sit in the uncomfortability of not knowing, or these two things, that usually there's always a way, somehow, some way, but our kind of right, wrong, left, right, conservative, liberal mindsets wants an either or rather than a yes and that when we can sit in the unknown for long enough, something will arise. And that doesn't mean we just sort of twiddle our thumbs. I think we actually have to be in action, and part of living your dharma is being in action. You have to kind of go after it, even take the first step towards something rather than just being immobilized or paralyzed. Nothing will kind of happen there. That just don't be afraid to make a mistake. That's what I learned, is don't be afraid to make a mistake. We can course correct. We have this inner GPS, and if I make a mistake, great. I'm humble enough to say, I'm sorry, or whoa, that was wrong, and I'll learn and I'll move on. But we live in a culture that doesn't necessarily make it welcoming to, once you've fallen, you can't get back up. Like once we've learned to walk, it's shameful to fall back. And it's like we have all the time and space for toddlers to learn how to walk, but as adults, there's not some version of like, adult toddlerdom of learning how to walk in our calling or in our vocation and our, what life is. And so I'm trying to extend a little more compassion, certainly to myself and others, and, have a little character named Color that provides like the walking stick for us all in those like stumble moments.
Oh, gosh, I love it so much. We could definitely sit and chat about all of this for hours because it's such a passion. It's such a needed topic. So I'm just so grateful for the conversation. I did want to invite you to just talk to us, maybe even briefly, if you're able, or highlight what you feel inspired to about the magic of color, creativity, and rest.
Beautiful. Well, like I said in the beginning, those are probably the three things that this book reminded me. Color, creativity, and rest. So color as like a phenomenon, like color as a form of expression, color as like, I believe nature picks it for a reason. And if we kind of look into the meanings behind color, from anything from picking a color of paint to paint your nursery or your studio, that they have calming effects, or, red is sometimes anger, or it can be caution. Blue, like think of blue sky, it's pacifying, it's calming, it speaks of vastness and creativity. Green is grounding, like the earth. It's also abundant. It's also the heart chakra. So it's expanding and opening. So just the world of color. And I think for me, what I found was when I can get stuck in recurring patterns of my thoughts or even negative beliefs, the bad guy in my book is called the gray area. And the gray area is basically confusion, doubt, uncertainty, ambiguity. And when I'm there, things can look bleak and they can look like there's no way out. But even just a little bit of color feels like it brings life to it. It's like the sprout growing through the concrete. It's like, okay, life will find a way, and it's a reminder. So I love color as a form of expression, and I do believe that everybody can use it to learn to paint and express, whether that's in how you dress, how you decorate your home, how you use it as paint or markers or artistically. That color is poetry. Creativity, similarly, as an expression and as a way to dance with the divine, as a way to co-create with life itself. And that creativity as a way to, as therapy, as a way to see what your soul wants to bring out into the world. And creativity as a way to be proactive, as a way to get yourself unstuck. Just even making something seems to, if it's writing a poem, if it's doing from the artist's way, the morning pages of journaling, of drawing, of creativity, of giving yourself that childlike permission to just make something without it having to be sold for $1 million or make any meaning or even be sold at all, or even going on a fridge. You can make it just for yourself, just because we're alive. And to make something is to create beauty or attempt to bring something into the world, to give birth. It's life-giving. And then rest was hands down the biggest lesson I learned through this. And in the hero's journey, there's always the moment of where you reach it's called like the nadir, or like the lowest point, the basement, the kind of underworld where you confront, whether it's your deepest, darkest, most subconscious things. And when I was there in my book, I was like, what do I do? I want to push through. How do I get through this? And I kept meeting my own edge. And my natural response was to over-discipline myself, do more, push more, be more. Like some version of me wasn't good enough. And I realized that's actually what needs to go. That's actually what needs to die. Like that's actually the thing that I actually need to overcome, this inner taskmaster or this inner slave driver of more effort, more. And that, you could say that that's actually synonymous with, the patriarchy now is more commerce, more, rules, more this. And so what I saw, this mother, there's a character named Runa, she's the goddess and she's the mother archetype in my book. she just started speaking to me and said, rest, just rest, child. And I went to a yoga class that same night, and Shavasana came to me, and I was like, this is like, we work so hard and then rest, and rest is restoration. Rest is, from rest, you think about winter, the season, from that rest comes spring. Life can be given, and from rest can be the new day when we go to sleep. And there's just something about taking an intentional pause. And so many of us have been burnt out by adrenal fatigue or overwork. And I'm like, what are we working for? Who are we working for? What is this? Is this the economy? Is this government? Like, what are we really trying to do? What are we working for? And if you look to nature, as I do, there are built-in moments of rest and respite. Even the waves, it's not just one constant wave right after another. There's a staccato, and there's a rhythm, and there's a pause. There's an inhale, there's a respite, and then there's an exhale. That there are these moments of pause that can give us energy and new life to go on, and just how important that was. And it felt very much like a feminine voice and a feminine message that I hadn't incorporated into my own life. As a creative, I love producing new things, and that there's such joy in that. But that somehow I had equated, if I watch Netflix, or if I kick up my feet, that I'm not doing enough, or that I'm not making the most of this wonderful life, that I'm somehow wasting it away. And that the ability to just turn off for a second and rest and be comfy and cozy is also part of life, and a necessary part. And so that's what I want to speak to. And that's actually what I want to infuse with this book. Is it's necessary. And again, it's also something that, aside from mattresses or beds or futons or couches, I don't know, but who's selling rest, and it's something that I'm beginning to champion, and seeing that from rest and true respite, that new life and inspiration, and that the deepest part of me and whatever wants to come through you is going to require it. It's actually going to be, it is a discipline of itself to be able to get to bed early and take care of yourself, so that you can then recharge and give to others.
Gosh, a huge amen to all of that. My goodness. Thank you for sharing that so much, Jon. Wow. In closing, it's like heartbreaking to even close, but we're already going a little bit over time, but I'm so grateful for your just bringing so much joy and energy and enlightenment to this conversation today. I know everybody's curious about where can they find your book. Would you like to share those details, Jon, and how they can connect with you too?
Sure. Wonderful. Thank you. So the book is called The Keepers of Color, and it's most abundantly stocked on Amazon right now. So, but also go ahead and find your local bookstore, your independent bookstore, wherever you find, and request it. The Keepers of Color. And I'm also have book will travel. So I'm looking to do both workshops and come and do book signings and little mini teachings on it. So if you have a place, whether it's a yoga studio or an educational center or a women's motherly group of looking to get back into the world, like, I will gladly come and, make this a workshopable sized lesson. But Amazon's a great place. The Keepers of Color. You can also you can look up through my name, Jon Marro. So it's JonMarro. And my website is jonmarro.com, JonMarro. And I'm at Jon Marro on Instagram, at JonMarro. So you can find me there. And Quinn links me, and Quinn and I are friends, so you can kind of find me through her as well.
Ah, beautiful. Well, in closing, I'd love any kind of final thoughts that you might have, or anything you might wish that you would have shared, or that you would love to leave in completion of this conversation today. Take a moment now.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it feels hard to say, but that's why I'm going to lean in and say it. Is one of the things I'm looking at, and that I encourage other people, is to not be so afraid of their shadow. That's ultimately what my book, I think, really does, is to get in there and look at that, and that whatever that is will stop us, and to go in there and beyond it, that's where the treasures lie. And so I can see where I was literally scared of the dark and scared of the kind of inner dark, and to be able to begin to traverse that and see that. Carl Jung is someone who's been speaking to me a lot, and he says that the best way to deal with the darkness of the world or the darkness in other people is to know it within ourselves. And he also knew himself so well as both like the villain and the hero, that he had compassion for everyone. And so the hero's journey is an internal one, and you're going to have your demons, your dragons, your shadow characters, but to know that you'll have compassion for yourself and compassion for others. And so that's ultimately what I want to encourage people. And I know it seems scary. It was scary for me. It's still scary for me, but I'm going in there, and there's worlds of wonder when I begin to like bravely take that on. And this book is a trusted guide. I can say that I did my absolute best in navigating it with humor and self-awareness and a childlike wonder, and also a warrior-like spirit of like, this is the work that needs to be done. So it takes up on all archetypes. And one last little thing, it's why it's called the Keepers of Color. The keepers are your friends. So there's this character named Color who guides you through, but then you meet a dolphin who teaches you about hearing your call, and a turtle who teaches you about patience, and a badger who takes a little lantern and helps you go into the shadow, and a lion that's a warrior and helps you learn how to pick those, fight those battles, and an owl that's wise and teaches you how to speak, see in the dark. So there are wonderful new allies and friends for you to meet that are here to help you navigate all of this and more. So thank you.
Oh, my heart is so full. Thank you so much, Jon. Thank you for braving your own hero's journey, that you could bring us this gift and help so many others to brave theirs as well. Know that Jon and I are cheering you on in your own hero's journey, which is also your joy journey, and just wishing you the most love and joy that can be savored in every bit of that.
And color.
And color as your guide. Oh, I love that you have that. I was so good. Thank you again so much, Jon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. We're so grateful, and we're sending you all so much love. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.